Hello. My name is Jeremy Halk, and I'd like to thank you for making the choice to join us here at the Greenbrier Church Online. A few months ago, I was at the gym trying to just labor through 30 minutes on a treadmill, and I noticed this guy off to my left who was lifting weights. He wasn't enormous, but he was pretty fit. His arms were covered in tattoos. He was wearing one of those bodybuilder shirts so that we could all see the definition in his muscles. He's grunting and pushing some heavy weight and constantly getting up to check himself out in the mirror. A few benches down from him, there was a kid, maybe 18, 19 years of age. He's pretty overweight. He's struggling just to bench press the bar. And after every rep, the tattooed guy would walk over to where the kid was and smirk and do a few poses in the mirror, glancing down to make sure that that kid could see him. Well, after about 3 or 4 minutes of this, another guy walks over to the benches, and this guy is huge. I mean, his shoulders are bigger than my head. His biceps have biceps, and, well, he makes tattooed guy look small by comparison. But this huge mountain of a guy walks over and sits down next to the kid and starts encouraging him. I noticed that the tattooed guy finished his rep and he just left. He didn't pose, he didn't smirk, he just looked at the bigger guy and left the building. It reminded me of how we like to play the comparison game. We look for the lowest hanging fruit to compare ourselves to so that we can feel accomplished or successful. And it's not just physical comparisons. We put our lives, our families, our careers, our spirituality all on one side of a scale, and then we go out and find someone that we can put on the other side of the scale. And we're really strategic about who we pick because we're not going to pick anyone who would balance the scale against us. We would prefer to pick the guy that hadn't been to church in a decade, or the family that they gentle parent their kids, or the coworker who drinks too much. We stack them on the other side of the scale and we look at our life so that we can feel the scale tip in our favor. And honestly, it feels good. We get this little spiritual self-esteem boost. You know, I understand that I'm not perfect, but at least I'm not that guy. We've all done it. Social media thrives on it. And honestly, there are times that we do it in our church, which is why Jesus tells this story today that feels so personal. Jesus recognizes the game coming from a mile away, and so he tells this story to expose it. It's found in Luke chapter 18. And before we get into the story, Luke gives us a little bit of insight. He tells us exactly why Jesus is telling the story, and it's critical. Then Jesus told the story to some who had great confidence in their own righteousness and scorned everyone else. Jesus isn't just telling some generic story. He's being very pointed to the people in the crowd who were confident in themselves. Because our confidence often produces a very ugly byproduct: contempt for other people. Basically, Jesus is picking a fight with the proud people by telling them a story. He's not interested in writing a self-help book. He's detonating a grenade in the middle of a crowd. And if we're really going to understand how explosive this story is, we probably need to forget everything that we think we know about the two characters in the story. It's true that the men in the story are from opposite ends of the social and religious spectrum. It'd be like me saying Billy Graham and a drug dealer walked into a church building. Immediately, you have a category. You know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. We today tend to hear the word Pharisee and we think hypocrite. But the folks in that original crowd would have had a completely different frame of reference. The Pharisees were the gold standard of faithfulness. There were only about 6,000 of them, and they were the religious elite, the Navy SEALs of the Torah. They had memorized enormous sections of scripture, plus hundreds of oral traditions layered on top as a protective fence. They fasted twice a week, not once a year like everybody else. They tithed on everything. If your kid was a Pharisee, you would put a bumper sticker proclaiming it on the back of the camel. These are the good guys. When this other character walks in, the mention of the tax collector would have made the original audience boo. This isn't some guy that works for the IRS. This is a traitor, a Jewish man who bought a franchise from the hated Roman government. His entire job was to collect money from his own people, give a part of it to Rome, and pocket whatever was left. They were notoriously crooked, ceremonially unclean, socially ostracized. They're the kind of person that you would cross the street to avoid. So when Jesus says 2 men went to the temple to pray, one was a Pharisee and the other was a despised tax collector, the crowd already has the script written. They know who the hero is and who's the cautionary tale. The Pharisee's going to be the example. The tax collector's going to get what's coming to him. Everybody's leaning in for the predictable ending. But here's the thing. Jesus doesn't normally do predictable. The Pharisee stands up front, probably in a prominent spot where everybody can see him, and he prays. But here's what's fascinating. He starts with the right words, I thank you, God, and that sounds good, right? But watch what he's grateful for. His thankfulness isn't rooted in who God is, it's rooted in who he is not. I thank you that I'm not like other people, cheaters, sinners, adulterers, and certainly not like that tax collector. Did you catch that? He starts off really, really well. He starts off with God, and then the rest of the prayer is about him. Luke even gives us a little editorial comment. He says that he stands off by himself. This prayer has God's name on the outside, but the heart of the Pharisee is the center, the only thing that matters in the prayer, because he's not communing with God. He's filing a status update. He's performing. The whole prayer is built on comparison. Almost every line is relational to somebody else. I'm not like other people. I'm not a cheater, a sinner, an adulterer. His sense of his own self-righteousness requires a backdrop of worse sinners so that he can stand against them. He has to find people who are worse than him so that he can feel good about where he stands. We need to understand that comparative righteousness is not righteousness. It's just a ranking system. And ranking systems always make you feel great until you find somebody that's higher up the scale than you are. I would imagine as he prays, he's looking around to see, does anybody see me up here? And in the processes of him looking around, he sees a tax collector and he blurts the quiet part out loud, or even like this tax collector. He's using another person as his spiritual measuring stick. And the heartbreaking thing is, he's actually right. He's nothing like the tax collector. He was morally upright, externally clean, and disciplined. But his goodness had become a barrier to the grace that God offers because it made him proud. I mean, look at how he continues. I fast twice a week. I give you 1/10 of my income. There's this shift there. Do you see it? He begins with God, but now the subject is I. I fast. I give. He's going above and beyond the law. 100+ fasts a year. He tithes from everything, even his herbs. He's not just checking boxes, he's making new boxes so he can check those as well. And here's the heartbreaking part of all of it. All of his fasting, all of his giving, all of his morality have become nothing more than stones to a monument he's built to himself. He's at the temple to worship, but he's bowing down at the altar of self. He looks holy, but his heart is a million miles from God. The saddest part of the prayer is that he never asks for anything. He never confesses anything. He never acknowledges any need that he has. There's no dependence on God. There's no hunger for God. And if you don't think you need anything from God, you can't receive anything from him. Grace, by definition, can only be received by people who know they need it. The Pharisee goes into the temple, he prays, he's there, but he leaves empty and he didn't even realize it. So now Jesus turns the camera and the original audience is nodding along, maybe a little convicted by the Pharisees' intensity. And Jesus forces them to look at the villain. But the tax collector stood at a distance and dared not even lift his eyes to the heaven as he prayed. Instead, he beat his chest in sorrow, saying, "Oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner." Every word is in direct contrast to the prayer of the Pharisee. The Pharisee stands boldly, probably right in the inner courts, drawing everyone's attention. The tax collector stands off at a distance. He feels his unworthlessness. He knows he doesn't belong. He can't even lift his eyes to the sky. He just stares at the ground. And he beats on his chest as an expression of deep and profound grief. It's something that you would see people do at a funeral. In this man's mind, he's at his own funeral. He's grieving his own spiritual death. He's not composing a flowery prayer. He's not cataloging his resume. He's so broken that his body participates in the prayer. He wouldn't dare compare himself to the Pharisee. He doesn't think, well, at least I'm not a self-righteous hypocrite. He stopped playing that game a long time ago. He's removed everybody else from the equation. He's standing alone before a holy and righteous God. And his prayer is short, but it's extremely powerful. "Oh God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner." That's the whole prayer. You know, that word merciful in the prayer is doing some serious theological lifting. He's alluding to the mercy seat, the place in the temple where the high priest would sprinkle blood of the atoning sacrifice on the Day of Atonement. The man is saying, "God, I don't have a sacrifice. I don't have a good work. All I have is this desperate hope that you are the kind of God that makes a way. Let the sacrifice that covers sin be applied to me." And one more thing. He doesn't say that he's a sinner. In the original language, he says that he is the sinner. He's not positioning himself as one sinner among a crowd of sinners. He sees himself as the worst. "God, I am the sinner." He genuinely has no other card to play. He just has this need, and he throws that need at the feet of God and begs God for mercy. He knows he can't fix himself. He can't trade his way back into right standing. He doesn't have anything to offer, so he offers the only thing that he has: honesty. And that's a prayer that God can work with. Now Jesus offers the ruling, and the words would have flipped the entire crowd's thinking upside down. He says, "I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God." The villain is the one who's justified. The good guy walks away guilty. The tax collector, the traitor, the extortionist, the ceremonially unclean sellout walks out of the temple with his sins forgiven, and the righteousness of God covering him like a robe. And the Pharisee, with all of the fasting and all of the tithing and all of the rule keeping, walks out the exact same way he walked in, unchanged and condemned. The tragedy for me is that the Pharisee is standing right there in the temple, just a few feet away from the blood of bulls and goats, but he didn't think that he needed it. He was righteous in his own eyes, so he missed the righteousness of God entirely. He plays this comparison game, and in his eyes, he won. But what he won was an empty heart. This would have been genuinely scandalous. The people in that crowd would have gotten angry because Jesus isn't just telling some cute little story about humility. He's dismantling their entire framework for how they understood righteousness before God. And I think we need to feel that. Because if this parable doesn't challenge us, if we just kind of nod along and pat ourselves on the back for not being a Pharisee, then we've completely missed it. So what does this ancient story have to do with us? I think it boils down to the fact that the heart of the Pharisee is alive and well. I see it in me. I see it in us. This parable diagnoses the condition that's the default setting of the human heart. We've just perfected the comparison game with new technology. It used to be that the Pharisee had to physically go to the temple to find a tax collector that they could look down on. I just have to pull out my phone, scroll through social media for a little while, and my heart is doing Pharisaical prayers without even realizing it. Oh, look at their vacation pictures. I bet they had to put all that on credit card. Lord, I'm really thankful that I'm a good steward of my money. Did you see that political rant? God, I'm so thankful that I'm not angry and divisive like they are. Social media has made it easy to pray a Pharisee prayer in 15 seconds or less. And the scary flip side is sometimes I'm the tax collector in the comparison game and I feel crushed about it. I see somebody's perfect family photo and I walk away feeling like a failure. Both sides of the comparison coin are a trap because you are never meant to find your identity based off other people. Who you are is who God says that you are, not who you are compared to somebody else. The Pharisee's resume was impeccable. Church attendance, exemplary. Giving record, over the top. Moral purity, check. But his resume had become his righteousness. And I meet people all the time who think they're going to stand before God and he's going to pull out their heavenly LinkedIn profile. He reads through it. Let's see. You never murdered anybody. That's good. You were mostly faithful to your spouse. Okay. You raised decent kids. You're not a tax collector. And God's still going to look at those people and say, depart from me, I never knew you. Because they're trusting in the resume instead of trusting in the cross. The most dangerous sentence we can speak is, I know I'm going to heaven because I'm a good person. That's the Pharisee's prayer. And it leaves us unjustified. I know that some of you have gone to church and been a member for a long time. Some of you have been following Jesus for decades. And in one sense, that's beautiful. But I want to invite you to examine whether your longevity in the faith has produced a greater dependency on God or a greater independence from God. Because it can go either way. Long faithfulness can produce deep humility or it can produce spiritual entitlement. And the difference is whether you've continued to come to God as someone who needs Him or whether you've started to come to God as somebody that deserves Him. The longer that we walk with God, the more we should understand our need for Him, not less. If the years of following Jesus have produced a growing self-sufficiency rather than a growing dependency, something's gotten off course in your life. The defining mark of the Pharisee is that he looked down on everybody else. If you find yourself looking down at a certain person or a certain group of people, if you sneer at them or roll your eyes at them, you need to be afraid and concerned because that is a massive spiritual warning light on your dashboard. A church full of people who pray, God, have mercy on me, a sinner, is a church that will have no time for contempt because you can't stand at the foot of the cross and look down on anyone. Jesus ends this parable with a statement he uses more than once in the Gospels. And it's not just a nice moral way to wrap up a good story. It's a description of how the kingdom works. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. That's the architecture of the kingdom of God. The way up is down. We're not asked to climb a ladder to get to God. We're asked to fall on our face. The first will be last. The servant is the greatest. The one who says, I am the greatest sinner, is the one that goes home justified. I want you to think for a minute about those two men walking down the temple steps. The sun is setting over the Mount of Olives. Two men had gone up to pray, and only one of them gets to go home justified. The Pharisee walks down those steps with his head held high, self-satisfied. His hands are full of his own righteousness. He's polished, he's impressive, and he's tragically empty. He came to the very house of mercy and he left unchanged, still dead in his sins because he was so busy polishing his own statue, he never saw the living God. A few steps behind him is a tax collector. His eyes are red. Tears have carved tracks through the dust in his cheeks. He's still muttering that prayer beneath his breath. He's not polished. He's a mess. But there's a new lightness to his steps. He knows who he is. He knows what he deserves. And he dares to ask God for mercy, who gives it to him, a full pardon. He walked into the temple carrying the crushing weight of his sin, and he walks out carrying nothing but grace. He is, in the eyes of the only judge that matters, righteous, clean, forgiven. So today, which one are you? And don't tell me about your theology. Tell me about the posture of your heart when nobody's looking. Can you even remember the last time you genuinely mourned for your sin? Not performed it, not confessed it as a box to check, but actually felt the weight of who you are before a holy God? Or have you just nodded your way through another sermon, secretly comparing yourself to the people sitting around you, the people who really need to hear this sermon so much more than you do? This is not just a cautionary tale about pride. This is one of the most beautiful and tender pictures of how God receives broken people. The tax collector came with nothing, no spiritual record, no acts of religious devotion, no good card to play, just his need and a desperate hope that maybe God would still receive him. And God did. He stood at a distance, but he came. He couldn't look up, but he came. He was full of shame, and he throws himself at the mercy of God. And Jesus says he goes home justified, because that's what grace looks like. That's the character of a God who runs towards the prodigal, who eats with tax collectors, who consistently, stubbornly, scandalously shows up for people who know they don't deserve him. We're able to go to the tables today because the currency of grace is need. And every single one of us has plenty of it. So let's be people of the tax collector's prayer, not just today, but every day. Not as some kind of rote formula, but as a posture of our soul. We need to come low, come honest, come needy. We need to stop comparing, stop performing, stop pretending. The bread and the cup are still available to those who will come as the tax collector came, with nothing in our hands and just this hope fixed on the mercy of God, who is greater than our sin, greater than our pride, greater than all the ways that we've tried to manage our own righteousness. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. That prayer didn't impress anyone in the temple that day. Doesn't really impress anybody watching today. But it's a prayer that sends you home justified, and that's the only thing that matters. So today, on this Father's Day, when we get to celebrate the men in our lives who have loved us, we get to go to the table to celebrate the Father that loved us, the Father that loves us, the Father that begs us to come. And if we will come to him and we will confess our desperate need for him, our loving and gracious Father will welcome us to his table, offer us the bread, offer us the cup, and remind us of his deep and abiding love. I hope you have a wonderful time at the table today. Never forget how deeply you're loved. And I look forward to seeing you very soon.